So like in society, bad ideas, can transform and be promoted in new ways. And the left, unfortunately, is very skilled at doing this. So this is something that we have to keep in mind, but not despair. We should not despair. We should have hope. We should enjoy life. One final note, Christopher Dawson was very familiar with many of these other views of history, including Toynbee, Arnold Toynbee, and Spengler, Oswald Spengler. He wrote very eloquently on Spengler and was very familiar with his views and basically rejected this view, very pessimistic view of Western culture. So culture is not exactly like a human organism that follows the law of biology and eventually, after reaching maturity, slowly declines and dies. That's not the way culture must work. There are cultures that do decline and eventually even disappear, but it doesn't have to be that way. It is possible to renew a culture. And if we have Christian hope, a supernatural virtue, we have the natural virtues but also supernatural virtues, I think that is what gives us the strength to endure and to continue in our work. And so I look forward to collaborating. There's much work to be done and there's much to be hopeful for. When I compare the country where I grew up in, I'm from the United States, I'm actually much more hopeful about Croatia than I am about that country, as odd as that might sound. So thank you again, and hopefully there's time for questions.
Yes, thank you very much, both of you, for these wonderful and interesting insights. I think they will motivate us and encourage in our future paths. Yes, are there any questions for our guests? Yes?
May I ask one? I'm Dražen Dujmović, president of Croatian Responsible Society, Hrvatskog, društvo, kojeg, udruge. I'm interested in one question for future. Now, in past we had globalization. That was something in world policy and how two countries have to react on issues between countries. And now is new paradigm. So what do you think, what is that new paradigm? Do you have some idea, maybe some new information, new idea about that? Because President Trump said a lot about that. And he said every country by himself, by every country
America first.
America first. That means other countries also want to be first in that, how to say, in that meaning. You understand me, I hope.
Robin,
Please, if you can. Thank you.
Well, globalism, as you know, I know what you meant by globalism, and it's perfectly legitimate use of the word globalism. But let me just say about globalism, that globalism as a word incorporates several things. And one of the things that it sort of started off with, so we were starting to talk about globalism as soon as I was then working for Mrs. Thatcher. And so really, as soon as we started to get to the end of the Cold War and so on, we then started to talk about globalism. But it was almost exclusively at the level of making the United Nations work better, because previously, if you have in the Security Council, you had the Soviet Union, it was always going to veto anything really that was of much significance. And I think actually more importantly, globalism referred to the growth of global international trade. Now, this isn't the first globalism we have ever enjoyed, because towards the end of the 19th century, despite the protectionist Americans and the protectionist Germans, and thanks actually, although they don't know that anybody did thank us, actually largely to thanks to Britain actually, the British Empire's effect, there was an international economic regime which was very, very open to transfers of capital, openness to trade. So a very large proportion, I can't remember now, but a very large proportion of world GDP was trade. And we only really started to get back to that proportion after the end of the Cold War. Now, the importance of that is that I think it's quite important not to think that just because we trade with another country, and actually we don't usually trade with other countries, I fall into the trap myself. One person trades with another person, and the other person may live in China, or they may not, and this of course is much more evident now with the internet, this kind of trading. But I don't think that we should feel that globalism economically is a threat, though it can bring along other threats in its wake, necessarily so. Now what Trump, of course, is, Trump is obviously a populist. Now I don't use the word populism as a term of insult or anything, it's just that the term is used and so it is. And Trump has said, Stjepo will come in on this, that he said America first, but it doesn't mean America only. And the point is that, of course, America is first, and America is actually defending a large part of the world. Okay, you may be doing it in their interests, but also in our interests. So I think that if there is a new paradigm, I hope, despite some of Trump's imposition of tariffs, I hope it won't be a new paradigm whereby the world ceases to be an open, global, trading world. I hope it's going to be, if there's a new paradigm, a world in which it is accepted that national interest is the prime and the legitimate end of every government, the pursuit of national interest. Now this is something which is completely alien to the ruling class in Croatia. It is extraordinary to me that you Croats, you fought and you died in this war for independence, and now people are quite prepared to allow to sign up to this, sign up to that, hand over powers here, there and the other, and nobody bothers at all. So, I mean, actually, this new paradigm, that's what the new paradigm is. It's about putting national interest first, not stupidly so, not thinking that you can go and have a war with somebody without consequences, but ensuring that government follows the national interest. That, I think, will be the new paradigm, and that, I think, Trump, bless him, would agree with.
I would just add, I personally, from my experience in government and knowing, at least superficially, some of these people running the European Union, so I don't trust them. So I'm not on the side of the globalists. I don't trust the elites. I think they have far too much power. I read an interesting piece recently where the writer was describing this new dichotomy of how people see politics, and there's two groups, the somewheres and the anywheres. Now the anywheres are people like Plenković, for example, who can work in Brussels, work, I don't know, in the United States, work in Zagreb, maybe tomorrow in another place. So these are anywheres who see the world as kind of their not home, but they feel comfortable, equally comfortable. Maybe he feels more comfortable in Brussels than he does in Zagreb, I wouldn't be surprised. But you have anywheres, and these are the people running corporations, running the IMF, running, and they're a class of their own, and they feel obviously very threatened by Trump. He's one of the first politicians in the modern age who openly shows contempt for them.